Hi, my name is Ekaterina Sotomayor. I'm an Indigenous program specialist and an Indigenous librarian with Multnomah County Library, and I'm here to share some books that I love with you today. Important part of my job is connecting people, teachers and students with reliable Indigenous resources, and so a lot of the books I'll talk about today are by and about Indigenous people, but not all of them, and I hope that as you listen you'll find something that you would like to read too. So let's get started with our first book. It is a great summer read. It is called Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you like mysteries, nature writing, or courtroom dramas, this is a good book for you. It's 1952, and Kaya is 6 years old when her mom puts on her alligator shoes, packs her suitcase, and walks away from their little shack in the marshes of the North Carolina Outer Banks forever. It's not long before Kaya's 4 older siblings also abandon her, leaving her with their abusive and alcoholic father, a man who disappears for days or even weeks at a time, only to return stumbling drunk, stinky, unshaven, from gambling and drinking who knows where. So Kaya is 7 years old, and she doesn't know how to count. She doesn't know how to read. She doesn't know when her birthday is. She's never had a friend, and she doesn't even know how to count the change that she gets when she has to go into town to buy groceries every week. Money that her dad gives her from his disability check that they call their Monday money. And things get even more complicated when Kaya is 10, and she realizes one day that her dad is never coming back either. Well, Kaya is resourceful, incredibly intelligent and observant, and even at the tender age of 10, she's able to figure out how to survive in the marshes in North Carolina on her own. But come the time when Kaya is 18, even though she has all of the skills to live indefinitely in solitude on her own, she realizes that she is craving love and attention and affection. And she gets the attention of 2 men from town, both of whom are just kind of mesmerized or entranced by her wild natural beauty. And this opens up a whole strange and startling world for Kaya. It just cracks her world open until one day when the unthinkable happens. The body of Chase Andrews, local skirt chaser and town darling, is found dead at the bottom of the town's fire tower. And everybody immediately suspects Kaya, this strange marsh girl. This book explores a lot of classism, touches on racism and loneliness and solitude, and you need to read it to find out what really happened to Chase Andrews. Will the town prejudices be strong enough to convict her of murder, and will she be sentenced to death? So this is a beautiful bestseller, a haunting novel, the debut novel by Delia Owens, and it reminds us how we are all forever shaped by the child within us and subject to the violence and beauty that nature imposes. So that is, excuse me, Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. So our next book is also has the element of crime, mystery, and thriller. So another great summer read if you're into those things like I am. It is called The Firekeeper's Daughter. It's by Angeline Beaulieu, who is a member of the Sault Ste. Marie band of Chippewa Indians. She's Ojibwe. So it's the summer after her senior year, and Ojibwe teen Donna Fontaine has made the hard choice to forego going to college. She meant to study, to go to Michigan State. She's a very gifted young scholar and scientist, and she wanted to study pre-med. But her uncle unexpectedly passed away, and her grandmother has had a stroke. And so Donis makes the hard decision to remain with her mother and to remain with her community. As she's coming to terms with the fact that she's going on this gap year, She's grappling with her identity as a biracial member of her tribe, dealing with community politics, and slowly falling for the new kid in town, a really handsome hockey player on her brother's team. Summer's looking all right until tragedy strikes. Donis witnesses her best friend, Lily, when she is shot at point blank range by her boyfriend. And her boyfriend kills Lily, and then he turns the gun on himself. So Donis all of a sudden is a witness to a murder-suicide. And she's enlisted, quickly becomes entangled in trying to figure out what happened there. And from that first involvement with a murder-suicide, she is asked to help investigate a drug ring that's happening in her town too, a meth ring. So things quickly escalate, and Donis needs to figure out where her allegiances lie and how far she will go to protect her community. So Angeline Bowie, the author of this book, she spent 10 years writing this book, and it shows. In it, Donis is just a really smart, a really resourceful, and incredibly likable protagonist. And the author really is able to seamlessly, expertly weave in glimpses of some of the many issues that face Indigenous communities today, and in a way that honors traditional knowledge and lifeways with sensitivity and respect. I just really love this book. It's fast-paced. There's a lot of plot twists. It's just going to keep you guessing, and you're going to be rooting for Donis while she's trying to figure out what the heck is happening with these murders, the murder-suicides, the drug wing, and that's just sweeping her nation. So finally, if you're one of those people that love comparing the book and the movie, this book, The Firekeeper's Daughter, has been optioned by the Obama's company. Anyway, it's been optioned on Netflix to become a Netflix series. So read the book and then watch the series if you can, see which one you like better. So the next book is also by Angeline Bowie. So if you liked that one, you're really gonna like this one. It's set in the same, it just came out, brand new. It just came out, and it is set in the same Ojibwe reservation as The Firekeeper's Daughter. Only it happens 10 years later. So it's called Warrior Girl Unearthed. It must be nice to not care about anything. Everyone always tells high school sophomore Perry Firekeeper Birch, to which smart Alec Perry always says, "It sure is." But everything changes when Perry's love of fast driving lands her in a ditch on the Ojibwe Sugar Island Ojibwe Reservation, and she's forced to take on an internship with her tribal government to pay for the repairs. Gone are her hopes of goofing off all summer. So her first assignment is at the tribe's museum. And at first it's just really, really, really boring. It's cleaning and more cleaning, and she doesn't understand the point. It's pretty much torture. But very soon she is pushed into one of the first of many adult situations that she's not prepared for. And she starts to learn about some of the less than ethical practices that go on in museums and archives regarding Native American ancestral remains and sacred artifacts. And she learns that, for example, the skeletons of Native American people in museums are typically disassembled and then kept in little boxes by bone part and not as whole, to be studied later by anthropologists. And this profoundly offends Donis, and she wants to do something about it. She's never been a rule follower, and she takes her first opportunity. She's pretty impulsive, and she liberates some seeds from a university collection. She is found out almost immediately, and she gets also fired almost immediately. So From then, for the rest of the summer, she's shuffled from department to department in her tribal government, and she learns more about museum practices, and she learns, she becomes embroiled in a involved in some of the murders and disappearances of Native women that are happening around her community. And she's also learning how difficult, really almost impossible it is for tribal people to get justice for women that are murdered or disappeared from their communities. And that makes her even more determined to pull off a heist that she's planning to liberate or extract and bring home the ancestral remains from a private collection. So you got to read this book, The Wire Girl Unearthed by Angeline Bowlby. Whoops. To find out what happens, you're going to be rooting for her and all of her teens and hoping that they are going to be able to escape crazy violence, drug gangs, prison, maybe worse, in this excellent book by Angeline Bowlby. So our next book is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This book has been incredibly popular in our library system for the last, since it was published, 3 or 4 years ago. It leaves records and holds in our system. So that's a side note, but it's written by a Potawatomi citizen. Robin Wall Kimmerer is a professor of environmental biology, and in this book, she weaves her knowledge of botany, of indigenous oral literature, and personal memoir into this compelling bestseller about the potential to blend in traditional indigenous wisdom with scientific method in order to build a more sustainable future for everyone. So at its core are stories, lots and lots of stories about plants, about, like I said, Potawatomi, oral tradition, creation stories about plants and sacred things, and then Robin's own life with plants. I mean, she's a botanist after all, so lots of plant stories. Indigenous readers are going to recognize a lot of the themes that she brings up in this book about reciprocity, gratitude, stewardship, our responsibility to the land and to the earth and to all of our relations on earth. You'll recognize stories about the Three Sisters and the Honorable Harvest. Some things might be unique to the Potawatomi Nation, or there might be parallels in your literature about strawberries and pecan groves and water restoration, things like that. Non-Indigenous authors will be introduced, if you don't know already, to just a really beautifully composed book about the natural world and our place in it, and be challenged to re-examine the way that we see and interact with both the natural world and the original inhabitants of this land. Just really a gorgeous book. If you have any interest at all in nature writing, in traditional ways of knowing, or are just interested in what it's like to be a modern Native scholar, this beautifully crafted, sometimes heartbreaking, always inspiring book is for you. It is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Sorry, I don't have physical copies of books because half of our libraries are closed and it's really difficult to get holds these days. But our next book is called Notable Native People. It's by Adrienne Keene, who I believe is from the Cherokee Nation. So raise your hand if you can name 5 indigenous people, any 5 famous Native American, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian people. Okay, well, keep your hand up if any one of those people is alive. No? All right, well, I didn't ask you that question to make you feel bad. I just wanted to show that if you don't know much about indigenous people in the Americas, you are not alone. And it's not really entirely your fault. Until very recently, very recently, like the last 5 to 7 years, there's been very little attention, very little resources dedicated to publishing books by and about indigenous authors. This book is awesome and unique and a great example of how that tide is turning. So A lot of people, like I said, don't know a ton about Indigenous folks in the United States. You might not know that there are 567 federally recognized tribes in the United States, that there are hundreds of more that are only recognized by the states, and that those numbers don't include Native Hawaiians or Pacific Islanders. So if you are one of those people that don't know much about Indigenous people on our continent, this book is for you. Cherokee author Adrienne Keene, it's formatted so that each page is a profile biography of one of 50 Indigenous leaders, dreamers, or change makers. And it's accompanied by gorgeous portraits by a Chamorro artist named Sira Sana. So the other great thing about this book is that Adrienne Keene was really intentional in who she curated to profile in this book. It's not meant to be comprehensive. It's meant to be like a slice of Native America. So she chose people from all over the continent, from various gender identities, age groups, tribal affiliations, locations, occupations. She was really intentional about including Black Native people, women, LGBTQIA folks, and Two-Spirit people. So it's amazing. There's many people here that I didn't know about, that I continue to be inspired by. It's a great jumping off point if you want to do further research. And I'll say that although it is marketed as a teen title, I really think this book is for everyone. You can open it up, read one page, and at the end of that one page, you're going to know something significant about a contemporary Indigenous hero. If you want to do more, you can read a couple of pages, maybe one of the essays that she's included that highlights some of the issues that are facing contemporary Indigenous America today. Or you could even read 5 pages, and the next time that someone asks you if you can name 5 famous Native American, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian people, you can raise your hand. So that is Notable Native People by Adrienne Keene. And our next book is kind of in a similar vein. This is a title that is an instant New York Times bestseller. It's called Project 562 by Matika Wilbur. Matika is Swinomish and Tulalip. Yeah. Anyway, so in 2012, Matika Wilbur sold everything in her Seattle-based apartment and hit the road. She set out on a quest to change the way that folks see Native America. Why? Well, she's a trained photographer, and she was teaching at the time, and she realized how little accurate representation there is of Native people in contemporary media, in films, in books, in newspapers, in magazines, and that the youth that she was teaching had no access to depictions of themselves or their communities. No contemporary role models. And also the voices, the stories of Native peoples are also not told. So the premise of her quest is simple. At the time, there are 562 federally recognized tribes. As I mentioned, there are now 567. So at the time, her quest was simple. She was going to go and visit every single federally recognized tribe and engage with people from that community and ask them their stories, any stories that they wanted to share, and she would photograph them. And her goal, she said, was to humanize Indigenous people and to do justice to the richness, diversity, and lived experiences of the nearly 5.2 million folks living in Indian country. So it took 10 years, traveling hundreds of thousands of miles by boat, by plane, on foot, on horseback, sleeping on people's couches, and in her RV, which she named the Big Girl. It took 10 years, but she did it. She did it, and the result is this incredibly gorgeous book. This incredibly gorgeous book, which is really, I would say, a photographic masterpiece. It's really is a great testament to her craft, and I think that she really did what she set out to do. The portraits are stunning, the narratives are compelling, and it has been called a vital contribution from an incomparable artist that inspires, educates, and truly transforms the way we see Native America. So gorgeous. I can't say enough things that are good about this. If you like the Humans of New York project, you're going to really like this one. And yes, please give it a read. Our next book, to go in a completely different direction, is a book that kind of changed my life. It is called Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. Oh my goodness. Ina May's Guide to Childbirth by Ina May Garden. So terrifying, unimaginable pain, emergency ER visits, mad dash cab rides, escalating medical emergencies that can only be solved by medical professionals, often resulting in major abdominal surgery or other, sometimes unnecessary interventions. That is the way that childbirth is portrayed in modern American culture. And if you're anything like me or any other woman that's anticipating pregnancy and childbirth, these images are so drilled into our collective psyche that the prospect of giving birth, of labor and delivery, and what is supposed to be excruciating pain does become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It becomes overwhelming and terrifying. This book provides a really empowering alternate narrative and solutions to those scenarios. At its core, it's based on the premise that under the right circumstances, given the right circumstances, the right support, good coping mechanisms, that childbirth can be an empowering and spiritual and beautifully transforming experience instead of a traumatic one. So if that sounds like a fantasy, and I know to some folks it does, if it sounds like an urban myth, I completely understand. But I will share that with the information that I got from this book, I was able to have a nearly completely pain-free labor and delivery with the birth of my second child. So Ina May Gaskin is the author, and she's been a leading advocate for natural childbirth for about 50 years. She was a midwife in this community of natural birthing folks for about 45 years. And her first book, Spiritual Midwifery, was an instant international bestseller and really changed the way a lot of folks think about labor and delivery. One of the unique parts of this book is that it incorporates a lot of birth stories, personal testimonials, personal narratives of women, their experience in labor and delivery, which all serve to sort of counteract that narrative that it needs to be a terrifying and excruciating experience. So I would say that I was really anxious to have a positive birth experience, and I literally checked out dozens and dozens, well, several dozen books on labor and delivery, and this is the book that I returned to. It was a good match for me because it provides not just the personal narratives that I mentioned, but also a lot of science-based information about the process of pregnancy, what happens during each stage of labor, different coping mechanisms. And then the second part of the book is dedicated to how natural childbirth is possible even within a hospital setting. So really an excellent book. If you or anyone you know is planning on giving birth anytime, I would highly recommend it. It's Ina May Gaskin's Guide to Childbirth. Our very last book is called To Kill a Mockingbird. It's by Harper Lee. It was published, in 1960, so seems like a million years ago, but not really. I know a lot of folks are not interested in reading the so-called classics. They assume they're boring, they're outdated, even obsolete, but I'm here to tell you that this book, if you're going to read any classic, is worth reading. In fact, this is the only book that I ever read, and then when I got to the last page, I took a deep breath and I turned it over and just started right over again from the first page. Some things never seem to change. Although this book takes place nearly 100 years ago in the Depression era South in Macomb, Alabama, the story is a familiar one. A man has been accused of a crime, and everyone knows the outcome of his trial even before it begins, and not because of the facts of the case, but because of the color of his skin. So the fact that the lawyer that's assigned to the case is actually intending on defending the man is something that causes no end of local scandal and gossip. That lawyer's name is Atticus Finch, and he's the single father of two kids, Jem, and then a little girl named Jean Louise, everyone calls Scout. And the book is told through her eyes. And she's pretty young. She's just started elementary school. So they are young enough, Jem and Scout are young enough to believe that just because Tom Robinson, the man that has been accused of raping this white woman, Mayel Yule, they're young enough to believe that because he's innocent, justice will be served. But that's not the case. You might remember a time when you felt that too, when you had that innocence, where you believed that just because something was true and fair and the right thing to do, that would be the deciding factor, whether it's right or not. In some ways, this book is a sad one because it is a coming-of-age story. It's a story about these children awakening to the harsh reality of racism. But in, I think, the most important ways, it's a story of hope. When Jem asks his dad, well, why are you even taking on this case if you know that you are probably going to lose it? Atticus replies, simply because we were licked, because we were beat 100 years before we even started, doesn't mean that simply because we were licked 100 years before we started is no reason for us to try not to win. And I think that's a really good message, a message that bears repeating. It bears repeating to ourselves and to our children in an age of heightened political division, internet trolls. It is a beautifully crafted book, and it reminds us all that it's necessary to remain strong in our convictions of what is truthful and what is just, and that sometimes you have to take a stand for what is right, even when you know that you're going to lose. That is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Beautiful book. I hope that you heard something that you would be interested in reading. Feel free to come up and ask me any questions. If you didn't hear anything that you want to read, my feelings aren't going to be hurt. You're welcome to check out the website. There's at mulcolib.org. There's literally millions of books that you can check out. I bet that there's one or more that would be perfect for you. You can also email us at the contact us link on our website, and there's a whole cadre of trained librarians that are just dying to make book recommendations to you. So check it out. Happy reading.